I'm Representative Gerry Pollet from the 46th District, which is north and northeast Seattle. This is an important question. Why are local governments so desperate for funding for police, for maintaining their county jail, or maintaining streets? And it's because for over 20 years, our state has capped how much increase there can be each year in their revenue from their property tax at just 1% growth. What else has been capped at 1%? Not the cost of having a police officer, not the cost of maintaining your jail or your custodial services or your park maintenance or your street maintenance, but the property tax, which funds all those things for local governments, has been capped at only growing by 1%. And we think that it's time to say, let's look at inflation and population growth and cap it at 3% even if inflation is much higher than 3%. But in order to try to keep up with the cost of hiring a police officer, maintaining a jail that's safe, and making sure that you can maintain streets and sidewalks, local sewer services, it's time to say, let's consider population growth and inflation and allow the property tax revenue for local government, if local officials choose, to go up to 3% per year. It's totally up to the local elected officials where you live whether or not they increase your property tax by 0 or 1% or 2% or 3% under this proposal. You elect them. If they tell you that in order to hire police or to run the 911 center or to pay for sidewalks, they need to increase the property tax for a year, you elected them. You can talk to them about whether or not it's necessary. But remember, under this bill, it'd be capped at 3% growth, even if your inflation is 7% for paying for the salaries for police officers. The property owner, a homeowner, let's be very clear, homeowners right now don't pay most property taxes in many jurisdictions. It's your commercial entities, your skyscraper if you're in Seattle, your shopping center in a suburban area or even a rural area. And under this legislation, most of the growth in any property tax increase is going to come from those larger, more costly commercial, manufacturing, or other high property tax properties rather than homeowners. So if there's a 3% growth in revenue from property tax, it might mostly come from adding a new shopping center in your jurisdiction rather than it coming from your property taxes as a homeowner. Our state's paramount duty, of course, is to fund public schools. And under the state constitution, the primary source for funding public schools is the state's portion of the property tax. And again, for the last 17 to 20 years, the growth in that property tax revenue has been capped at 1%, even though the cost of hiring the custodian to keep the school clean and clean up the throw up from a fourth grader on the floor, or to have a paraeducator working with a child, none of those only grow at 1%. But the property tax for schools has only been allowed to grow at 1% per year, which is what has driven our state into such deficit in funding our public schools. If we were to allow for 3% growth when we have high inflation, next year we would have $90 million for our schools. And that adds up very quickly to ensuring that we don't have to lay off thousands of educators, which we'll have to do unless we have new progressive revenue. And this is indeed a much more progressive revenue source than the state sales tax and other revenues. As a homeowner, your property tax is not even going to probably go up by 3% under this legislation. It's certainly misleading if someone were to say we're tripling your property taxes. That's kind of a ludicrous claim. What's happening is the commercial, the manufacturing, those properties, they pay more of the local property taxes than the homeowner do. So if we're allowing an increase of 3%, then they will pay proportionally more towards that revenue cap. And your property taxes, we heard from Snohomish County under this bill, might only go up $3 on an average home. And cities have estimated in larger cities, maybe $20 a year in order to pay for our schools and our children's education, which are deep underwater. That's a good value.